So a few weeks ago, actually about a month and a half ago now, over 4th of July weekend, I had the opportunity to go up with my family to visit my grandmother on the Cook side. So not the Antians, but go up to the farm in Indiana and visit my grandmother up there. And it was really nice. I hadn't been back to the farm in a little while, so getting to be up there, see the family, and look for how we could help out, and just able to catch up with my grandmother as well was a really nice way to spend some time. And my dad asked my grandmother ahead of time to make a list of things that we could do to help out, whether it was trimming shrubs or fixing the Wi-Fi or whatever else it might be. Have a list of tasks that we could help knock out while we were up there. And so she did that, and we had a yellow legal pad of things that we were able to check off while we were there, of all the itinerary of things to make sure we got everything squared away. And we did that. But we got in on, was it Wednesday night or Thursday? Wednesday night that we got in, and then we left on Friday. And so we were there for a couple days. And at one point on Thursday afternoon, I was sitting in talking to my grandmother, telling her about my job and how everything's going. And I was sitting here facing the window, and my grandmother's in front of me. And so she can't see out the window, but I could. And in the background, all I would see is my dad going back and forth, doing like on the lawnmower, like weed whacking, tree trimming, you name it. He was out there moving everything, doing everything. And I started to feel a little guilty, like, man, maybe I should be out there helping him, kind of thing. But then I kind of had to step back a little bit and remember at the time that I was visiting with my grandmother, who I hadn't been able to catch up with recently, and she was really excited to hear about me. And so it was nice to be able to say, I think I actually am doing a pretty good thing in here, being able to talk to my grandmother instead of taking that time separately just to go help out outside. If we only would have done all of the things on the yellow legal pad and not visited with her at all, she would have said it's a bad visit. We didn't do any of we only did the things and we didn't talk to her. And same vice versa. If we only sat in and talked to her and hung out, then we wouldn't have gotten the things done that needed to be done. Either way, it wouldn't have been a successful visit. There needed to be a balance of both from all of us. And so my title for today's message is, Are you a Mary or a Martha? Are you a Mary or a Martha? And I know this congregation is one that is full of Marys, so it is a little bit biased towards you, I guess. But my purpose for this message is to check where you are personally and get you thinking about how we can all be a better true servant of our Lord Jesus Christ. We'll look at 3 discussion points of this story of Mary and Martha and what we are to take away. So we'll turn over to Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Luke 10, 38. And we'll see the story of Mary and Martha. And this is the only gospel account of this story of Mary and Martha, but we'll go through this and break it down and again take three discussion points on what we are to take away from this story. And this is the only place we'll go, so you can get the Bible there and sit there, which is nice. In Luke 10:38, this is Luke writing, "Now it happened as they went that he, Christ, entered a certain village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving." And so we'll pause there. So my discussion point number one, what are they? So when I say the title is, Are you a Mary or a Martha? What's a Mary and what's a Martha? So what is Mary doing? In this bit of context that we're given, in verse 39, and she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. So Mary's sitting there talking to Christ, having a good conversation. So Mary's someone in my eyes that is always willing to have a great conversation, always willing to call and check in, and someone that can, if you had a prayer request, will always be fully aware and follow up with you and be really thoughtful in how they remember to talk with you. So if that's a Mary, someone that's always willing to have a great conversation, again, we don't know here exactly what Christ was telling her. There's no teaching recorded. We just know that there was a conversation that was had. Let's call a Mary someone that's willing to have a great conversation. So then what's a Martha? In the context that we're giving here, at verse 38, Martha welcomed Christ into her house. So she was welcoming, but in verse 40, but Martha was distracted with much serving. So Martha is, when I think of a Martha, they'd help you move in a heartbeat. If you said tomorrow, I need to move out, I need this couch moved, I need furniture moved, whatever, they would be there in a heartbeat to make sure everything was done. They'd be setting up chairs, setting up potlucks, whatever it might be. They'd be the one running around like crazy, making sure everything is done and taken care of. And to put a little bit of perspective on this story, so we know Christ came to Mary and Martha's house, but it likely wasn't just Christ. So he would have had at least the 12 with him. And then he's been known to have a bigger entourage than that. So at a minimum, it's likely 15 people just showed up at Martha's door. And with no microwave or anything to get everything going, she's likely being pretty busy making sure everything's getting done. So the range, I think, is about 15 to 30 people just showed up at Martha's door, and she's expected to take care of them all. And Mary's talking to Christ. So Martha's running around like crazy trying to deal with 30 people. And I don't know if any of you have ever hosted a dinner party for 30 people, but there's a lot to do. So it makes sense. So if a Mary's someone that's always willing to have a great conversation, and a Martha's someone that's willing to help you move in a heartbeat, then let's continue the story. In verse 40, but Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached Christ and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. So we talked about a Mary and a Martha. Then the discussion point number 2 that I want to focus on, why is Mary's service better? So Christ said, one thing is needed, Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. So point number 2, why is Mary's service better? How does that work? It gets me thinking a little bit about Cain and Abel, how there was one better sacrifice, and how some of these things work of why one thing is better than the other. And if we know that Christ came to serve, not to be served, and Martha's serving, then why is she in the wrong? How does that make sense? So I wanted to look at, well, maybe she just wasn't serving right. Maybe that was the problem. She just wasn't serving in a good way. So I looked up in verse 40, but Martha was distracted with much serving. That word for serving there is diakonia, which is our root word for deacon today. So hopefully that's a pretty good type of service if we have a role dedicated to it in our church today. So if that's not an issue with the serving, at this point, if I was Mary, I'd be like, am I not doing what you wanted me to do, Christ? I'm serving. You came to serve. I'm serving people. What am I doing wrong? Am I not serving how you want me to? So the way that I kind of reconciled this in my head then, if Martha isn't doing the better thing, then why? If Martha was too distracted getting the appetizers ready for everybody, she wasn't talking to the literal Son of God in her living room. She was too busy dealing with everything else that was going on, which obviously needed to be done, but she was missing out on her relationship with God because of it. And this is really the crux of this message. Does our service of God interfere with our relationship with him and our fellowship with others? I'll say that one more time. Does our service of God interfere with our relationship with him and our fellowship with others? Do we let it consume us and worry and trouble us when we have so many things that we're juggling? And again, Martha is likely trying to deal with 30 people. She had a lot of things that she was juggling. And do we let that get in the way of our relationship with God? It's not that we shouldn't be serving. It's not that we shouldn't be doing that, but does that interfere? So it's not common for a Mary to get mad at a Martha. If you're in talking mode and you're socializing and you can see someone else is helping, you're never going to be that frustrated. But it's pretty common for a Martha to get mad at a Mary. If you're running around doing everything, I always use the example of packing the car. If I'm the one that's throwing all the suitcases around and getting everything done and my family's in there sitting on the couch, I'm kind of like, well, what are you guys doing? Like, why are you not pitching in? And it can be that way at church or in other places when you're the one doing all the serving. Sometimes you can get a little bit upset that everyone else isn't helping in the same way as you are, but you don't know what they're talking about in most cases. Maybe they're having a conversation that really needs to be had, and maybe that's the better thing. But it's pretty common for that Martha to get mad at the Mary when you're in serving mode. It's easy just to assume that they just don't want to help, but that's not where we can be. We need to make sure that we're of the right frame of mind. And that goes into point number 3. Do both. Do both. So maybe when we were going through it initially, you're like, well, I'm definitely a Mary, or I'm definitely a Martha, and I'm not the other one. That's just not me. That can't be our frame of mind. We have to be able to do both. Don't pigeonhole yourself into saying you're just one of the two. And also don't do one because you're afraid to do the other. As a kid, we would have these big General Conference of Elders dinners in Cincinnati with my parents and my grandparents. We'd have a bunch of people in, and it was me and the old people at the time is how I considered it. I was about 10, and everyone else is 4 decades older than me at least. And so I'm there, I'm socializing. They're all really nice people, and we would chit chat for a little while, and then they would start to get into the politics of everything that was going on, and that's when my eyes would glaze over and I would tune out. And so I would be eating very quickly. And the way I channeled this I would finish really fast, and then I would start taking everyone else's plates into the kitchen. And I got a lot of the nice compliments of like, look at Josh, he's so willing to help serve, he's so willing to do all this. And it's really just because I was only being a Martha because I didn't want to be a Mary. I didn't want to talk to them anymore. That was my way out to get to the kitchen, and then I didn't have to go back in if I didn't want to. So I was only being a Martha so I wouldn't have to be a Mary. And I think we can all agree that's the wrong frame of mindset to have. It's not bad that I was serving, but I was doing one because I wasn't willing to do the other. And that's not the frame of mind that we should have. It's good to be both a listener and a doer. And a conversation often lasts longer than moving a chair. That doesn't mean it doesn't have to get done, but don't forsake the fellowship of the brethren just to serve. Maybe get into Martha mode with somebody when you're the one pitching in and everything. If I was the one taking the plates in, maybe if I ask someone else to help me, then I'm still able to talk with them as we're going and still have a little bit of that balance of both. Then the task goes faster and you have someone to talk to during and after the task is finished. Also, depending on the role, this is often how you can train someone else up to help you in the future too. Oftentimes when we latch on to a certain serving role and we don't want to let others help because that's our thing. Sometimes if I was taking all the plates in, that's my thing, no one else touch them, I'll do it. That's not the right frame of mind that we should have. We should be willing and accepting other people to help us in those roles. But it's better to let others help you be a Martha so you can get to being a Mary too. So if we're doing both, we talked about being able to do both, but we also have to know when to. So going back to the story at the beginning of me at my grandmother's house, if I would have left right when I was talking to my grandmother about my job and everything and said, I'm needed outside, I gotta go, that wouldn't have gone over so well. It was time for me to talk to my grandmother there instead of running away from that conversation. But there's, again, that balance to be found. If I was just in Martha mode the whole time, just running around getting all the tasks done, and I never sat down to talk to my grandmother, I don't think she would have been that happy with me. But if I was only ever talking to her and had no interest in pitching in, I don't think my parents would have been that happy with me either. So there's definitely both sides of that. There is a balance to be found, but again, we need to make sure we're not letting our service of God interfere with our relationship with him. So today, we learn more about what being a Mary and a Martha means, kind of what we are as people, and how we should learn and think about serving others. We also learned about how our service of God can actually interfere with our relationship with him and our fellowship with others. Again, there's a balance to be found, but in my eyes, I think there's three categories really. There's Mary mode, there's Martha mode, and then there's neither. You also can run away and say, I'm not going to help do anything. I'm going to go sit in the corner, not talk to anybody, and not pitch in. And obviously, we should be in the two camps of Mary and Martha, but knowing when to do both. Like most things in life, there is a balance to be found. I hope this message checks where you are personally and gets you thinking how we all can be a better true servant of our Lord Jesus Christ.